Hey everyone, how's it going? Sitting low, just hanging out in the garage late night, and I mean late night, coming at you guys with another video. And this is the stripping down of the OBS harness, and as you can see, it is already done, but don't get mad. I did record and kind of explain the whole process as I went through. I just forgot to film like a intro for it. Alright, so what I'm doing right now is, as you can see, I've got the harness, fuse box, and everything. This was the original harness that came out of the truck initially to power the 4.3. And what I'm doing is, since when I got the truck, I didn't remove the engine and trans, so I don't know what any of these plugs were. So what I'm doing right now is I'm identifying all these plugs and I'm labeling them, because before I start stripping this harness all down, I want to know what I'm removing from it. That way I don't get stuff confused and start removing stuff that doesn't need to be removed, and you know how that goes. So anyway, just figured I'd point that out. Alright, so I got all my connectors all identified and labeled, and I got the harness laid out on my little 4x8 sheet of plywood work table here. But as you can see, how I'm kind of going about this is, you can see like this whole area here, and then it goes up and then branches outward. Like, picture this as you would picture like a tree growing in the ground, okay? This would be like the main trunk, okay, and the roots in the ground. And this would be like, the main trunk, and then it just branches off into individual branches. So how I'm going to go about stripping this harness down is I'm going to remove all the loom and all the tape. As I'm going through and removing stuff, I'm going to use just lightly zip tie everything. That way it just kind of holds its formation, the way it is kind of sort of now. And then I'll, go through it later on and readjust or whatever I got to do. But basically I'm going to start, as you would a tree, you would start trimming the branches and then work your way back to the trunk, I guess. So that's my plan of attack. I've been kind of putting this process off a little bit because I want to make sure I have all of my, I's dotted and my T's crossed, because, from 96 to 97 to 98 and up and, all around, the pinouts are similar, but they're different, you know what I mean? So I want to make, damn certain that I get all my pin assignments correct before I just start cutting and jumping wires around. Because if I were to just go off of LT1 swaps OBS pin out, I would look at this blue connector, for example, and it says that you got to use pin 9 and 15 on his example. And if you can see in my harness, there isn't even a wire in pin 9 on this harness. And same goes for 15 as well. Actually, there is a wire in 15, but it's not the wire that that they're talking about. It's a definitely different color wire. So like I said, I want to go around, jump around, play on the internet, find schematics, just do as much research as I can before I start stripping everything down and start actually removing stuff. I'm going to start removing all the loom and all the tape and stuff. That way I can start peeling stuff away as necessary. But as far as like cutting and removing stuff, I'm going to take my time with that. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start removing this loom and rest of the tape off this harness. I've already removed a, good portion of the tape. So just plugging away. Alright, so at this point I got all the loom and the tape from all the connectors and stuff removed. I did use a few zip ties to just kind of, loosely keep everything congregated together in the manner in which, it was. But I'm going to be, as I'm thinning the harness out, I'm going to be cutting some of those zip ties and pulling wires and connectors back through. The whole reason of doing this process here is because, obviously you want to retain some of your truck's basic functions, like the air conditioning, you know, the gear range selector, the neutral safety switch, you know, stuff like the underhood lights, stuff like the ABS, and all that kind of stuff. And what you end up doing is, you know, obviously they integrate the truck's, you know, body control harness and the whole engine harness into one, you know, big loom as to, you know, string it throughout the truck as to where it needs to go. So by thinning this process out, we're pretty much removing all of the engine control functions of this harness, because we're putting our 5.3 in, and it's going to have its own standalone, you know, PCM harness to run it. So the only thing that we're thinning this harness out for is just to, you know, retain some of our factory air conditioning functions, keep our neutral safety switch and our gear range selector working, and our starter function, all that stuff working. Stuff like the oil pressure sensor switch, because on some of these older GMT 400 trucks, the oil pressure switch also works in conjunction with the fuel pump relay. And obviously, you know, the GMT 400 has its own fuel pump of its own, you know, so we're, instead of using the, I guess, the second relay on the standalone harness, we're just going to go ahead and use the relay that's already in the factory fuse block to turn the fuel pump on. We're just going to need pretty much just one wire out of this harness to trigger that. So that's pretty much the reason we're doing this, just to thin it out and just kind of integrate it in with the new 5.3 harness. That way all of our gauges and, you know, stuff like that work. So anyway, like I said, I'm still kind of in the research phase of this, so I'm just gonna kind of chill for a minute, you know, jump around online, do some you know, reading, researching, take some notes, maybe some pictures here and there, and, you know, once I'm certain that I know the pinouts of everything, then we can go ahead and start removing the harnesses, or not the harnesses, but these, you know, some of these plugs. Like, you know, obviously we're not going to use this ignition module plug, we're not going to use this ignition coil plug, but we are going to use this white wire that for our tack signal, and just basic stuff like that. Stuff that we are going to keep is stuff for like the air conditioning compressor, underhood lights, starter wire. You know, I think I've already said all this, but anyway, yeah, that's where I'm at. I'll be back. I'm about to start tearing into this 4.3 harness, and this is for a 1996. And I got to thinking, as per LT1 swap instructions, he pretty much, you know, tells you to simplify the harness, keep the sensors and the Prindle switch and stuff you're actually going to need, thin all that stuff out. But since you're going to be pretty much eliminating, you know, the injectors, the MAP sensor, the EGR and all that shit, and the oxygen sensors from this harness, you're going to be left with, you know, this wire, key hot circuit here, this key hot circuit here, and this key hot circuit here. And that's for, you know, the ignition, 10 amp, ECM1, 20 amp, and then ENG, and that's a 20 amp. I was thinking about just, instead of getting, you know, this, he does, as like I said, as per LT1 swap, he does the simplification of the harness, and then he buys one of those 4-slot fuse boxes and then a relay to turn the key hots on. I was thinking about just using these 3 existing circuits here to trigger the key hots on the LS harness, and that way you wouldn't have to worry about, you know, buying that fuse box thing, and you also wouldn't have to worry about finding another relay to trigger the key hots. It would all just work like it does from the factory. And another thing is like, you could tie all your, you know, key hots and stuff together however you want to do it with the LS harness, and then just simply get like a, you know, a 4-pin or whatever plug, and just simply plug this in and have a nice clean factory look. So that is kind of my school of thought on this. What do you guys think? Has anyone done that before, or should I just stick with just buying the little separate 4 fuse block dealio there? I kind of think this would be, you know, this would theoretically work just the same, and it would still integrate, you know, these, you know, it's still all be the same. So I don't know. What do you guys think?